The Zephyrian Empire stretched across 17 star systems, its crystalline cities gleaming like jewels against the void of space. For 3,000 years, the empire had remained unchallenged, ruled by beings whose very presence could bend reality to their will. The Zephyrians stood 12 feet tall, their bodies composed of living crystal that shifted colors with their emotions, and their minds possessed telepathic abilities that could crush weaker species into submission. Emperor Vexithara sat upon his throne of pure diamond, watching the holographic displays that showed his vast dominion. His crystal form pulsed with deep purple hues, indicating his current state of contemplation. The throne room itself was a marvel of engineering, carved from a single massive gemstone that had taken his ancestors centuries to shape. Prismatic, light danced across every surface, creating an otherworldly beauty that had intimidated countless ambassadors from lesser species. Today, however, something different approached his empire's borders. The scanning stations had detected a small vessel, primitive by Zephyrian standards, but moving with unusual confidence through their outer territories. The ship bore markings from a species the Empire had never encountered before, though their databases contained scattered references to a young race called humans. Admiral Kethavar materialized in the throne room through the Empire's advanced teleportation network, his crystalline form crackling with orange energy that signified urgency. He bowed low before speaking, his voice resonating through both sound and telepathic waves. "Your Magnificence, the alien vessel refuses to acknowledge our hails or change course. It appears to be heading directly toward the Forbidden Sector." Emperor Vexithara's form shifted to an ominous red, the color of barely contained fury. The Forbidden Sector contained the Empire's most closely guarded secret, something so dangerous that even his own subjects were forbidden from approaching it. For millennia, the Zephyrians had maintained their power through careful control of this secret, using it to fuel their advanced technology while ensuring no other species could access its power. "Deploy the Guardian Fleet," the Emperor commanded, his telepathic voice causing the very air to vibrate. "This human ship will learn respect for our boundaries or it will be destroyed." As the Admiral departed to carry out his orders, Vexithara found himself curious about these humans. According to the limited data they possessed, humans were a carbon-based species from a single world, possessing no telepathic abilities, no advanced crystalline technology, and no apparent method of faster-than-light travel beyond crude mechanical devices. They should have been insignificant, barely worth the Empire's notice. Yet something about this lone human vessel troubled him. It moved through space with a purpose that suggested its occupant knew exactly where they were going and what they would find there. The ship's trajectory would take it past 3 heavily fortified Zephyrian worlds, through a dense asteroid field that had claimed dozens of ships over the centuries, and directly to the heart of the Forbidden Sector. The Emperor rose from his throne and walked to the massive viewing portal that dominated one wall of his chamber. Beyond the crystal-clear barrier, he could see the swirling nebula that concealed his empire's greatest secret. Somewhere within that cosmic cloud lay the source of all Zephyrian power, a discovery that had transformed his people from simple, crystal beings into the dominant force in this region of the galaxy. His ancestors had found it 3 millennia ago, during their first tentative explorations beyond their home system. The object was ancient beyond measure, clearly the product of a civilization that had vanished long before the Zephyrians had even evolved. It was a structure of impossible geometry, seemingly larger on the inside than the outside, filled with energies that defied every law of physics his people understood. The eternal flame, as they had named it, was not actually fire in any conventional sense. It was something far more fundamental, a source of pure energy that could be shaped and directed by those with sufficient mental discipline. The Zephyrians' natural telepathic abilities had allowed them to interface with the flame in ways no other species could achieve, granting them powers that bordered on the godlike. But the flame was dangerous, unpredictably so. Attempts to study it too closely had resulted in the complete obliteration of entire research teams. The Empire's greatest scientists had determined that the flame existed partially outside normal spacetime, making it effectively infinite in both power and peril. Too much exposure could tear apart the very fabric of reality itself. This was why the Forbidden Sector existed, why an entire region of space was kept clear of all traffic except for the most essential maintenance missions. The Zephyrians had learned to harvest the flame's energy in carefully controlled amounts, using it to power their greatest technologies and enhance their natural abilities. But they had also learned to fear it, to approach it with the reverence due to something that could unmake their entire civilization with a single miscalculation. Now, a human ship was heading directly toward that danger, and the Emperor could not understand why. Humans possessed no telepathic abilities that would allow them to safely interface with the flame. Their primitive technology would be utterly inadequate to contain or control such forces. If they somehow reached the flame and attempted to study it with their crude instruments, the resulting catastrophe could destroy not just their small ship, but potentially destabilize the entire sector. The Emperor's crystalline form shifted through a complex pattern of colors as he considered his options. He could simply destroy the human vessel before it reached the Forbidden Sector, eliminating the threat with minimal effort. But something stayed his hand, a nagging curiosity about what drove this unknown species to venture so boldly into the heart of an empire that could crush them without effort. Perhaps it would be more instructive to capture the humans alive, to study their motivations and learn how they had discovered the location of the Forbidden Sector. Such knowledge could prove valuable in ensuring that no other species made similar attempts in the future. As if responding to his thoughts, another communication arrived from Admiral Kethavar. The human vessel had just passed the outer Guardian stations without slowing, its primitive shields somehow deflecting the warning shots fired across its bow. More troubling still, the ship appeared to be adapting to Zephyrian scanning attempts, its hull somehow becoming less visible to their sensors with each passing moment. Emperor Vexithara's form blazed with golden light as a new possibility occurred to him. Perhaps these humans were not as primitive as they appeared. Perhaps they possessed knowledge or abilities that the Empire's databases had failed to record. If so, they represented both a potential threat and a potential opportunity. The game was beginning, and the Emperor found himself genuinely intrigued for the first time in centuries. Captain Sarah Chen sat in the pilot's seat of her modified exploration vessel, the Prometheus, watching the Zephyrian fleet assemble ahead of her position. Her dark eyes remained calm despite the overwhelming odds she faced. 12 massive crystalline warships moved into formation, their hulls gleaming with the unmistakable energy signatures of weapons that could vaporize her small craft with a single coordinated volley. The communication array crackled to life, filling the bridge with harmonious but alien sounds. Sarah had spent 3 years learning the Zephyrian language from captured transmissions and stolen databases, preparing for this moment. The voice that emerged was clearly artificial, translated through some kind of universal interface. Unknown vessel, you have entered sovereign Zephyrian space without authorization. Reduce velocity and prepare to be boarded, or face immediate destruction. Sarah leaned forward and activated her own transmitter, speaking in fluent Zephyrian that caused obvious surprise among the fleet commanders. She could see their ships hesitating as her words reached them. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Exploration Corps. I request an audience with your Emperor regarding a matter of mutual concern. I carry information about the eternal flame that your people guard so jealously. The silence that followed stretched for several minutes. Sarah used the time to study the Zephyrian ships more closely, noting their elegant but impractical designs. Beautiful as they were, the vessels showed clear signs of technological stagnation. Their energy weapons were powerful but inefficient, their shields strong but inflexible. Everything about them suggested a civilization that had reached a technological peak and then stopped innovating. When the response came, it carried undertones of anger and suspicion that needed no translation. How do you know of the eternal flame, human? That knowledge is forbidden to outsiders. Sarah smiled grimly as she crafted her reply. The truth was both simpler and more complex than the Zephyrians could imagine. Humanity had not discovered the flame through espionage or conquest, but through the strange quirks of human curiosity and their species' peculiar relationship with danger. My people have encountered similar phenomena before, she transmitted. We know what the flame truly is, and we know why your empire is slowly dying because of it. This time the reaction was immediate and violent. Energy beams lanced out from 3 of the Zephyrian ships, converging on the Prometheus with enough force to crack a small moon. But Sarah had been expecting this response, and her ship was not as defenseless as it appeared. The Prometheus twisted through space with impossible agility, its hull seeming to phase in and out of normal spacetime. The Zephyrian weapons passed harmlessly through what appeared to be empty space, while Sarah's ship emerged unscathed several thousand kilometers away. Admiral Kethvar's voice roared across the communication channels, his crystalline fury evident even through the translation matrix. Impossible. No primitive species possesses phase shift technology. Sarah's response was delivered with deadly calm. We are not primitive, Admiral. We are simply different. Your people see the universe through the lens of crystalline perfection and telepathic dominance, but there are other paths to power, other ways of understanding reality itself. The truth was that humanity had stumbled upon dimensional manipulation, almost by accident. While other species focused on manipulating matter and energy through advanced materials and psychic abilities, humans had taken a different approach. Their lack of natural telepathic gifts had forced them to develop technology that worked with the universe's fundamental forces in ways that most advanced species never considered. 50 years ago, human scientists had been conducting experiments with quantum entanglement when they accidentally created a small rift in space-time. Instead of sealing it immediately and declaring the experiment too dangerous to continue, they had done something typically human. They had studied it, pushed its boundaries, and eventually learned to control it. The breakthrough had come when Dr. Elizabeth Kowalski realized that consciousness itself played a role in quantum mechanics, but not in the way telepathic species assumed. Where beings like the Zephyrians use their psychic abilities to impose their will upon reality, humans learned to work with reality's natural flexibility. They discovered that the universe was far more malleable than anyone had imagined, provided you approached it with the right combination of scientific understanding and intuitive leap-taking. Now the Prometheus carried technology that could manipulate space-time itself, allowing it to phase between dimensions, accelerate beyond the speed of light without traditional FTL drives, and interact with exotic phenomena that would destroy conventional ships. But more importantly, it carried knowledge that could save the Zephyrian Empire from a fate they didn't even realize was approaching. Your eternal flame is not a gift, Sarah transmitted to the assembled fleet. It is a parasite. Every time your people draw energy from it, they weaken the barriers between dimensions. Your empire sits on the edge of a cascading quantum collapse that will eventually consume not just your civilization, but this entire sector of the galaxy. The Zephyrian ships had stopped firing, their commanders clearly struggling to process this information. Sarah could imagine the telepathic conversations flashing between their crystalline minds, the growing doubt and fear as they considered the implications of her words. Emperor Vexithera's presence suddenly filled the communication channels, his mental voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. You will come aboard my flagship, human. You will explain these claims in detail, and you will submit to telepathic examination to verify your truthfulness. If you are lying, you will die in ways your species cannot imagine. Sarah had been expecting this demand as well. She knew that the Emperor's offer was both a trap and a genuine opportunity. The Zephyrians would attempt to probe her mind, to extract every secret she carried and determine whether her warnings were real. But they would discover that human consciousness was far more complex and resilient than they assumed. I accept your invitation, Your Magnificence, Sarah replied formally, but I should warn you that human minds do not function the way you expect. Your telepathic examination may reveal more about your own limitations than about my truthfulness. As she spoke, Sarah was already preparing for what would come next. The small device implanted behind her ear hummed to life, activating quantum shielding that would protect her thoughts from invasive telepathic scanning while allowing her to maintain the appearance of cooperation. More importantly, it would allow her to demonstrate human capabilities in ways that words alone could never accomplish. The Prometheus began moving toward the massive Zephyrian flagship, its hull shimmering with dimensional distortions that made it appear to exist in several places simultaneously. Sarah watched the alien warriors preparing to receive her, noting their graceful but rigid movements, their obvious reliance on technology they no longer fully understood. They thought they were bringing a primitive alien aboard for interrogation. Instead, they were about to encounter something they had never faced before. A human being with nothing to lose and everything to prove. The real test was about to begin, and Sarah Chen was exactly where she wanted to be. The teleportation chamber aboard the Zephyrian flagship materialized around Sarah in a cascade of brilliant light and crystalline harmonics. She found herself standing in a circular room whose walls seemed to be carved from a single massive gemstone, with patterns of light flowing through the crystal matrix in complex geometric designs. The beauty was undeniable, but Sarah's trained eye noted the subtle signs of decay that the Zephyrians themselves seemed blind to. The crystal formations were developing hairline fractures, and the energy patterns flowing through them showed irregular fluctuations that suggested systemic instability. Whatever the eternal flame was doing to enhance Zephyrian technology, it was also gradually destroying the fundamental structure of their civilization. Emperor Vexithera stood waiting for her, his 12-foot crystalline form shifting through colors that had no names in human language. Around him stood a circle of lesser Zephyrians, their minds linked in a telepathic network that hummed with barely contained power. Sarah could feel the weight of their combined psychic presence pressing against her consciousness like a physical force. "Welcome aboard the Dominion's Pride, human," the Emperor said, his voice carrying both mental and auditory components that created harmonics in the crystalline walls. "You stand in the presence of beings who have ruled 17 star systems for 3 millennia. Your species has existed in our awareness for less than a century, and yet you claim knowledge that predates our empire." Sarah stepped forward without showing any sign of intimidation, her human normal height making her appear almost childlike among the towering crystalline beings. But her posture radiated confidence, and her dark eyes met the Emperor's faceted gaze without flinching. "Knowledge and wisdom are not the same thing, Your Magnificence. Your people have accumulated vast knowledge about how to use the Eternal Flame's power, but you have never truly understood what it is or where it comes from." High Telepath Zarathek moved forward, her crystalline form pulsing with silver energy that indicated active psychic scanning. "We shall see how truthful this primitive creature truly is. Prepare yourself, human. Your mind will be opened and examined." The psychic assault began immediately, a coordinated mental probe designed to shatter Sarah's psychological defenses and expose every thought she had ever carried. The Zephyrians had used this technique on countless species over the millennia, reducing proud ambassadors to babbling wrecks within moments. But Sarah's mind did not collapse under their assault. Instead, something unprecedented happened. The quantum shielding implanted in her brain activated, but rather than simply blocking the Zephyrian probe, it redirected their psychic energy in ways they had never experienced. The telepathic network connecting the Zephyrians suddenly filled with images and sensations that were utterly alien to their experience. They saw Earth through human eyes, felt the chaotic beauty of a world where evolution had produced countless diverse species instead of a single dominant form. They experienced human emotions in their raw, unfiltered intensity, without the crystalline clarity that characterized Zephyrian thought. Most shocking of all, they felt human curiosity, that peculiar drive that compelled Sarah's species to investigate dangerous phenomena instead of avoiding them. The Zephyrians recoiled from this mental contact, their ordered thoughts struggling to process the chaotic complexity of human consciousness. Emperor Vexithera's form blazed with colors that had never been seen before as he experienced human memory directly. He saw Sarah's childhood on a world where technology and nature existed in careful balance, where humans had learned to work with natural forces instead of dominating them completely. He felt her years of training as an explorer, the deliberate cultivation of skills that would allow her to survive in hostile environments and make contact with alien civilizations. But most disturbing of all, he experienced her deep understanding of dimensional physics, gained through decades of study and experimentation. Through her memories, he saw human scientists working with quantum phenomena that the Zephyrians had never even detected, manipulating the fundamental structure of space-time with tools that looked primitive, but achieved results that surpassed anything in the Empire's arsenals. "Impossible," High Telepath Zarathek whispered, her silver light flickering with uncertainty. "This creature's mind contains knowledge that should not exist. Her species lacks the telepathic gifts necessary to perceive higher dimensional mathematics." Sarah smiled grimly as the Zephyrian telepaths withdrew from their failed probe. "That's your first mistake. You assume that telepathy is the only way to understand the universe, but consciousness itself is a quantum phenomenon, and there are many ways to expand awareness beyond the limitations of biological evolution. She gestured to the crystalline walls around them, where the light patterns were now visibly fluctuating in response to the dimensional distortions created by their psychic contact. Your people discovered the eternal flame and assumed it was a gift from some ancient civilization. But you never asked the right questions. Why was it hidden in that nebula? Why does it exist partially outside normal space-time? Why does prolonged exposure to its energy cause the kind of dimensional fractures that are slowly destabilizing your entire empire? Emperor Vexithara's form shifted to deep purple, the color of profound contemplation mixed with growing fear. Explain your meaning, human. Sarah moved to the center of the chamber where the light patterns in the walls converged into a complex mandala of energy. The eternal flame is not a source of power. It's a warning beacon, left behind by a civilization that faced the same choices your people face now. They discovered a way to tap directly into the quantum foam that underlies all reality, drawing virtually unlimited energy from the spaces between dimensions. She raised her hand, and the quantum device behind her ear projected a holographic display that showed the mathematical relationships governing interdimensional energy transfer. The equations were so complex that even the Zephyrian telepaths struggled to follow them. The process works perfectly, for a while. You can draw enormous amounts of energy with minimal apparent cost. Your technology advances by leaps and bounds. Your civilization reaches heights that seem impossible. But every time you draw energy from the quantum foam, you create tiny instabilities in the fabric of space-time itself. The holographic display shifted, showing how these microscopic instabilities could cascade into larger problems. At first, the damage is negligible, easily absorbed by the universe's natural resilience. But as your energy consumption grows, the instabilities begin to accumulate and interact with each other. Eventually, they reach a critical threshold. The display now showed a terrifying simulation, a chain reaction of dimensional collapse that spread outward from the eternal flame's location, consuming star systems as the very structure of space-time unraveled. The civilization that built the eternal flame realized what was happening just before it was too late. Sarah continued. They couldn't stop the cascade they had already started, but they could contain it. They transformed their entire civilization into a dimensional anchor, using their combined consciousness to hold the collapse in check. Emperor Vexthara's form had gone completely colorless, a state of shock that none of his subjects had ever witnessed. You are saying that the eternal flame is not a power source but a prison? A prison containing the compressed remains of an entire galactic civilization, Sarah confirmed. And your people have been slowly weakening that prison for 3,000 years. According to my calculations, you have perhaps 50 years before the accumulated damage reaches critical mass. When that happens, the dimensional collapse will resume and nothing in this galaxy will survive it. The chamber fell into absolute silence as the implications of her words sank in. The Zephyrian Empire, for all its power and majesty, was built on a foundation that was slowly crumbling toward universal catastrophe. And only this small human, representing a species they had dismissed as primitive, seemed to understand the true nature of their situation. The revelation hung in the air like a death sentence. Emperor Vexithara stood motionless for long moments, his crystalline form cycling through colors that had no precedent in Zephyrian emotional vocabulary. Around him, his telepathic advisors struggled to process information that challenged every assumption their civilization had built upon. Admiral Kethvar was the first to break the silence, his orange energy flaring with desperate denial. This human lies. Our greatest scientists have studied the eternal flame for millennia. They would have detected any instabilities, any signs of dimensional weakness. Sarah turned to face the Admiral, her expression mixing pity with frustration. Your scientists see what they expect to see. They approach the flame with telepathic abilities that are perfectly designed to interface with its energy, but completely blind to its true nature. It's like trying to understand a symphony by only listening to a single instrument. She gestured again, and her holographic display shifted to show a comparison between Zephyrian scanning methods and human dimensional analysis techniques. Your people perceive reality through the lens of crystalline order and psychic resonance. You see the flame as a source of power because that's what your minds are structured to detect. But dimensional physics operates according to principles that telepathic consciousness cannot directly perceive. High telepath Zarathek moved closer, her silver light flickering with uncertainty. You claim your primitive species possesses abilities that we lack? Humans have no telepathic gifts, no crystalline matrices to amplify mental energy. How could you possibly perceive what we cannot? Sarah's smile was neither mocking nor superior, but carried a weight of understanding that seemed far beyond her apparent age. Because we learned to think differently. When humans first encountered quantum mechanics, we discovered that consciousness and reality are connected in ways that don't require telepathic abilities. We learned to work with uncertainty, to accept paradox, to find patterns in chaos. The quantum device behind her ear hummed, and suddenly the entire chamber filled with a three-dimensional map of local spacetime. But this was no ordinary star chart. It showed the underlying dimensional structure of reality itself. The quantum foam that existed in the spaces between atoms, between thoughts, between heartbeats. This is what we see when we look at your empire, Sarah continued. The map zoomed in on the forbidden sector, revealing a complex web of dimensional fractures spreading outward from the eternal flame's location. Every time your people draw energy from the flame, these fractures grow a little larger. They've been growing for 3,000 years. Emperor Vexithara finally found his voice, though it carried harmonics of despair that resonated through the crystalline walls. If what you say is true, then our entire civilization is doomed. We cannot simply stop using the flame's energy. Our technology, our power, our very way of life depends upon it. That's the trap the previous civilization fell into, Sarah agreed. They became so dependent on dimensional energy that they couldn't give it up, even when they realized the consequences. But there is another way. The holographic display shifted again, showing a complex schematic that combined elements of both human and Zephyrian technology. My people have spent decades studying dimensional physics from a different perspective. We've learned to work with quantum uncertainty instead of trying to impose order upon it. We've developed techniques for dimensional manipulation that don't destabilize the underlying structure of spacetime. Admiral Kethavar's form blazed with skeptical orange light. And you would share this knowledge with us? What do humans gain from helping an empire that could crush your entire species without effort? Sarah's expression grew serious, and for the first time since boarding the flagship, she showed signs of the enormous pressure she was operating under. Because if the dimensional cascade begins, it won't stop with your empire. The collapse will spread at the speed of light, consuming everything in its path. My homeworld, my people, everything we've ever known or could become will be destroyed along with yours. She paused, looking directly at each of the Zephyrians in turn. But there's another reason. Humanity has always believed that intelligence and consciousness are too precious to be wasted. Your people have achieved wonders that my species can barely comprehend. The art, the science, the 3 millennia of accumulated wisdom. All of it would be lost if we simply let the cascade happen. Emperor Vexithara's form began to show traces of golden light, a color associated with hope in Zephyrian psychology. What exactly are you proposing, Captain Chen? A collaboration unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen, Sarah replied. Zephyrian telepathic abilities combined with human dimensional manipulation techniques. Your people's mastery of crystalline technology, merged with our understanding of quantum mechanics. Together we can not only stabilize the eternal flame, but transform it into something that serves life instead of threatening it. The holographic display now showed a vision of the future that took every observer's breath away. The eternal flame had been transformed from a dimensional wound into a carefully controlled gateway, allowing for travel and communication across vast distances without the energy costs that had been slowly destroying reality. The Zephyrian Empire had expanded beyond its original 17 systems, but now it shared the galaxy with dozens of other species, each contributing their unique perspectives to a vast collaborative civilization. This is impossible, High Telepath Zarathek protested, but her silver light was flickering with something that might have been excitement. The technical challenges alone would require centuries to solve. Not if we work together, Sarah countered. Human innovation combined with Zephyrian patience and precision. Your people's ability to maintain complex mental constructs merged with our talent for finding unexpected solutions to impossible problems. She gestured to the walls around them, where the light patterns were still fluctuating in response to the dimensional distortions created by their earlier psychic contact. You've already seen proof that our technologies can interact in unexpected ways. My quantum shielding didn't just block your telepathic probe. It created a temporary bridge between our different forms of consciousness. That's just the beginning of what we could accomplish. Emperor Vexithara moved closer to the holographic display, studying the technical specifications with growing fascination. His crystalline form was now cycling through colors that indicated deep thought mixed with cautious optimism. Even if such cooperation were possible, he said slowly, there would be enormous political obstacles. My people have ruled this region for 3 millennia. They are not accustomed to sharing power or accepting guidance from species they consider inferior. Sarah nodded, acknowledging the challenge. Change is never easy, especially for a civilization as successful as yours. But the alternative is extinction, not just for your people but for every intelligent species within 50 light-years of the eternal flame. She let that sink in before continuing. Besides, this isn't about humans telling Zephyrians what to do. It's about 2 very different forms of intelligence working together to solve a problem that neither could handle alone. Your people remain the rulers of your empire, but they gain access to techniques and perspectives that could extend that rule for millions of years, instead of merely decades. The Emperor's form blazed with golden light as the full implications became clear. You are offering us immortality, Captain Chen. Not just for individuals, but for our entire civilization. I'm offering you a choice, Sarah corrected. Between a future of gradual decline followed by catastrophic collapse, and a future of unlimited growth and cooperation. But the choice has to be made soon. Every day of delay brings the dimensional cascade closer to critical mass. The chamber fell silent again, as the Zephyrians contemplated the most important decision in their civilization's history. Outside the flagship, the human vessel Prometheus waited patiently, its hull shimmering with dimensional distortions that served as a constant reminder of the powers that humanity had learned to wield. The future of the galaxy hung in the balance, waiting for an empire to decide whether it could swallow its pride long enough to accept help from an outsider. 3 days had passed since Sarah's revelation, and the Zephyrian flagship remained in tense orbit around the outer edge of the Forbidden Sector. Emperor Vexithara had summoned every senior advisor, scientist and military commander in the Empire for an unprecedented telepathic conference. The crystalline chambers of the dominions, pride buzzed with psychic energy as thousands of the Empire's greatest minds debated the future of their civilization. Sarah spent these days as an honored but closely watched guest, given access to technical databases that no outsider had ever seen before. What she discovered confirmed her worst fears. The dimensional fractures surrounding the eternal flame had progressed much further than her long-range scans had indicated. The Zephyrians had perhaps 20 years before total collapse, not 50. More troubling still, she found evidence that similar phenomena had occurred in other parts of the galaxy. Ancient ruins scattered across 17 different star systems all showed the same characteristic dimensional scarring, suggesting that multiple civilizations had discovered and misused dimensional energy sources. Each time, the result had been the same: total annihilation. On the 4th day, Emperor Vexithara summoned her to the flagship's primary laboratory, a vast chamber filled with crystalline instruments that defied human understanding. The Emperor's form was cycling through deep purple and gold patterns, indicating a state of profound decision-making that his advisors recognized but rarely witnessed. Captain Chen, he began, his telepathic voice carrying undertones of reluctant respect, my advisors have raised numerous objections to your proposal. They question whether humans can truly be trusted with knowledge of our most sacred secrets. They worry that your people will use our cooperation to gain advantages over us in the future. Sarah had been expecting these concerns. What do your advisors suggest as an alternative? The Emperor's form shifted to darker colors. Some advocate for immediate implementation of Contingency Protocol 7, which would involve the complete evacuation of all 17 systems and the destruction of the eternal flame through dimensional bombardment. That wouldn't work, Sarah said bluntly. Destroying the flame through conventional means would only accelerate the dimensional collapse. You'd trigger the cascade you're trying to prevent. Others suggest that we should simply accept our fate with dignity, using the remaining time to preserve what we can of our civilization's knowledge for future species to discover. Sarah's expression grew hard. 20 billion Zephyrians deserve better than noble suicide. And what about the other species in this region? The Altarians, the Vegan Collective, the Centauri Federation? Do they deserve to die because your people are too proud to accept help? Emperor Vexithara's form blazed with colors that indicated both anger and grudging admiration. You do not speak like a supplicant seeking favor, Captain Chen. You speak like an equal demanding accountability. Because that's what this situation requires, Sarah replied without backing down. Your Magnificence, with respect, this isn't about Zephyrian pride or human ambition. This is about survival on a galactic scale. Every moment we spend debating politics, the dimensional fractures grow larger. The Emperor moved to a massive crystalline console and activated a holographic display that showed the current state of the eternal flame. The image was breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure. The flame itself appeared as a writhing mass of energy that existed in several dimensions simultaneously, surrounded by a complex lattice of containment fields that the ancient civilization had built with their dying breath. But Sarah could see what the Zephyrians had missed. The containment lattice was failing, not because of age, but because of incompatible technology. Every time the Zephyrians drew energy from the flame, their crystalline extraction systems created harmonic resonances that slowly weakened the ancient safeguards. "Show me your energy extraction protocols," Sarah requested. Studying the display with growing urgency, Emperor Vexithara hesitated for a moment, then gestured to his technicians. A series of additional displays activated, showing the complex procedures the Zephyrians used to tap the flame's power. The technology was elegant and sophisticated, but Sarah could immediately see the fundamental flaw. "Your extraction systems operate on principles of harmonic resonance," she observed. "You're essentially singing to the flame in frequencies that match your crystalline matrix technology. But the ancient containment system operates on quantum uncertainty principles. Every time you create harmonic resonance, you're forcing quantum states to collapse in ways that weaken the containment fields." The Emperor's scientific advisors materialized around the console, their forms flickering with colors that indicated intense concentration. Chief Scientist Velthar, whose crystalline structure was more complex than any other Zephyrian Sarah had encountered, stepped forward. "The human speaks of principles we have never encountered," Velthar admitted. "Our entire understanding of physics is based on crystalline resonance and telepathic field manipulation. These quantum uncertainty principles are beyond our experience." Sarah activated her own holographic projector, overlaying human dimensional mathematics onto the Zephyrian displays. "That's exactly why you need our help. Your people evolved to perceive and manipulate reality through order and harmony, but quantum mechanics operates on chaos and probability. The universe is fundamentally uncertain at its smallest scales, and the ancient civilization that built the flame understood this." She highlighted specific sections of the containment lattice, showing how they were designed to work with quantum uncertainty rather than against it. These safeguards aren't trying to impose order on the flame. They're creating controlled chaos, allowing the dimensional energy to exist in multiple probability states simultaneously. It's like the difference between building a rigid dam to hold back a river versus creating flexible channels that guide the water's natural flow. Chief Scientist Velthar's form cycled through rapid color changes as he processed this information. "If your analysis is correct, then our entire approach to energy extraction has been fundamentally flawed from the beginning. We have been gradually destroying the very system that keeps us safe." "Worse than that," Sarah continued grimly, "my calculations suggest that the harmonic resonance from your latest extraction attempts has accelerated the deterioration. The containment system is now failing at an exponential rate. We have perhaps 18 months before complete collapse, not 20 years." The laboratory fell silent except for the crystalline harmonics that permeated all Zephyrian technology. Emperor Vexithara stood motionless for several minutes, his form completely colorless as he processed the implications of this news. 18 months, he finally said, his telepathic voice carrying notes of despair that resonated through every crystal in the chamber. "Even if we immediately cease all energy extraction, could the deterioration be stopped?" Sarah shook her head. "The cascade effect has already begun. Simply stopping the extractions would only slow the collapse, not prevent it. The only solution is to actively repair the containment system using techniques that work with quantum uncertainty instead of against it. And your people possess such techniques?" "We've developed some promising approaches," Sarah admitted. "But honestly, this is beyond anything humanity has attempted before. We've worked with small-scale dimensional manipulation, created localized space-time distortions, even built limited quantum probability engines. But stabilizing something like the eternal flame would require techniques we're only beginning to understand. Emperor Vexthara's form began showing traces of red, the color of barely controlled anger. So you offer us hope with one hand while admitting inadequacy with the other? I'm offering you the truth, Sarah replied firmly. Neither of our species can solve this alone. But together, combining Zephyrian mastery of large-scale energy manipulation with human understanding of quantum mechanics, we might have a chance. She gestured to the holographic displays surrounding them. Your people have 3,000 years of experience working with the flame's energy. You understand its patterns, its rhythms, its responses to different stimuli. What you lack is the theoretical framework to understand why it behaves as it does. Chief Scientist Velthar moved closer to the human displays, his complex crystalline structure refracting light in patterns that indicated intense fascination. And humans possess this theoretical framework? We've made a good start, Sarah said. But theory without practical experience is just speculation. We need your empirical knowledge to turn quantum mechanical principles into working solutions. Emperor Vexthara's form suddenly blazed with golden light as a new possibility occurred to him. You are proposing a true partnership. Not human dominance over Zephyrian resources, nor Zephyrian control over human knowledge, but genuine collaboration between equals. That's the only way this works, Sarah confirmed. Your people provide the power and precision needed for large-scale dimensional engineering. My people provide the theoretical foundation and adaptive problem-solving techniques. Neither approach is superior to the other. They're simply different tools for different aspects of the same problem. The Emperor turned to address his assembled advisors, his telepathic voice carrying new harmonics of determination and hope. 6 months later, the Forbidden Sector had been transformed into the most ambitious scientific project in galactic history. Where once only Zephyrian maintenance ships had dared to venture, now a vast collaborative fleet worked around the clock to prevent the dimensional collapse that threatened everything they held dear. The human vessel Prometheus had been joined by 12 of Earth's most advanced research ships, each carrying teams of scientists who had spent their entire careers studying dimensional physics. Alongside them, the Zephyrian Empire had deployed resources on a scale that dwarfed their greatest military campaigns. Massive crystalline platforms hung in space around the eternal flame, their surfaces covered with hybrid technologies that combined human quantum mechanics with Zephyrian energy manipulation. Sarah stood on the observation deck of the joint command vessel Harmony, watching teams of humans and Zephyrians work side by side on problems that neither species could have solved alone. The sight still amazed her, even after months of collaboration. Crystalline beings 12 feet tall bent over quantum probability calculators, while humans in environmental suits calibrated resonance crystals that towered above their heads. Dr. Elizabeth Kowalski, the human quantum physicist whose breakthrough had made dimensional manipulation possible, materialized beside Sarah through the ship's teleportation system. The 70-year-old scientist still looked uncomfortable with Zephyrian transportation technology, but her eyes blazed with the excitement of someone witnessing the impossible become routine. The latest test results are in, she reported, her voice carrying a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. The hybrid containment matrix is holding steady. We've managed to stabilize approximately 30% of the damaged quantum lattice. Sarah felt a surge of hope, but tempered it with the hard-earned caution of someone who had seen too many promising experiments fail at the last moment. What about the harmonic resonance problem? Are the Zephyrian extraction systems still interfering with the repairs? That's the remarkable part, Dr. Kowalski replied, her scientific enthusiasm overriding her fatigue. Chief Scientist Velthar's team has developed something unprecedented. They've learned to modulate their crystalline resonances to match quantum uncertainty patterns instead of fighting against them. It shouldn't be possible according to everything we know about telepathic species. But they're doing it. Through the observation deck's transparent aluminum windows, Sarah could see one of these modified extraction systems in operation. The crystalline structure looked similar to traditional Zephyrian technology, but its behavior was completely different. Instead of the steady, harmonious patterns that characterized their usual approach, this device seemed to dance with chaos, its resonance frequencies shifting in patterns that followed quantum probability curves. How are their telepaths adapting to the uncertainty principles? Sarah asked. She had been worried about this aspect of the collaboration from the beginning. Telepathic species generally found quantum uncertainty deeply disturbing, since their mental abilities worked best with ordered, predictable systems. Better than anyone expected, Dr. Kowalski admitted. Apparently, the most advanced Zephyrian telepaths have always been aware of quantum effects. They just didn't have a theoretical framework to understand them. They've been unconsciously compensating for uncertainty all their lives. Emperor Vexithara's presence suddenly filled the observation deck as he materialized through the ship's teleportation network. His crystalline form had changed over the months of collaboration, developing new facets and color patterns that seemed to reflect his expanded understanding of quantum mechanics. The traditional purple and gold of Zephyrian royalty was now interwoven with patterns of silver and blue that had no precedent in their cultural history. Captain Chen, Dr. Kowalski. He greeted them with a formal bow that had become their standard acknowledgement of human customs. I bring news from the deep analysis teams. We have successfully mapped 87% of the original containment lattice. Sarah turned to face the Emperor, noting the subtle signs of strain in his crystalline matrix. The past months had taken a toll on all of them, but the burden of leadership during this crisis had been particularly heavy for Vexithara.
What did they find?
The Emperor's form shifted to display complex patterns that served as a form of three-dimensional writing in Zephyrian culture. Human observers had learned to read these patterns as easily as spoken language, another small miracle of adaptation that the collaboration had produced. The ancient civilization was far more sophisticated than we realized, he explained. The containment lattice isn't just a passive barrier holding the flame in check. It's an active system that was designed to gradually transform the flame from a dimensional wound into a controlled gateway. Dr. Kowalski's eyes widened with excitement. A gateway? To where? That is what we are still attempting to determine, the Emperor replied. But the implications are staggering. If we can complete the original design, the eternal flame could become a doorway to other dimensions, other universes, perhaps even other times. Sarah felt a chill of apprehension mixed with her excitement. That's assuming we can stabilize it first. What's our current timeline for preventing the cascade collapse? The Emperor's form shifted to darker colors, indicating the seriousness of their situation. Chief Scientist Velthar estimates that we have successfully slowed the deterioration by approximately 60%. Instead of complete collapse in 12 months, we now have perhaps 18 to 20 months before critical failure. But Sarah could hear the unspoken concern in the Emperor's telepathic harmonics. But the repair work is becoming exponentially more difficult as we progress. The damaged sections of the lattice are interconnected in ways we are still discovering. Each repair reveals new problems that require increasingly complex solutions. Dr. Kowalski moved to a nearby control console and activated a holographic display showing their current progress. The image was both encouraging and daunting. Nearly a third of the containment lattice glowed with the steady light of successful repairs, but the remaining sections pulsed with warning colors that indicated instability and damage. We're approaching the limits of what our current hybrid technologies can accomplish, she admitted. The next phase will require techniques that neither species has ever attempted. We'll need to literally rebuild sections of the lattice while it's still containing energies that could vaporize entire star systems. Sarah studied the display, her mind racing through possibilities and calculations. What about the consciousness transfer protocols? Has anyone made progress on understanding how the original builders merged their awareness with the containment system? Emperor Vexithara's form blazed with colors that indicated both excitement and apprehension. That may be our greatest breakthrough and our greatest challenge. The ancient builders didn't just sacrifice their lives to create the containment system. They uploaded their entire civilization's consciousness into the quantum matrix itself. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. They're still in there? The entire civilization that built the flame? In a sense, yes, the Emperor confirmed. Their individual personalities were lost eons ago, but their collective knowledge and expertise remain embedded in the lattice structure. That's why our repairs have been possible at all. The system has been guiding our efforts, teaching us techniques we never could have discovered on our own. Dr. Kowalski sat down heavily in a nearby chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they were dealing with. We're not just repairing a machine. We're collaborating with the uploaded consciousness of an entire galactic civilization. And that consciousness is dying, Sarah realized with growing horror. Every time the lattice degrades further, we lose more of their knowledge. If the cascade collapse occurs, we won't just be destroying our own civilizations. We'll be committing genocide against a species that has been trying to save the galaxy for millions of years. Emperor Vexithara's form showed patterns of deep sadness mixed with determination. Which is why we must succeed, Captain Chen. The burden we carry is not just the survival of our own peoples, but justice for those who sacrificed everything to give us this chance. Sarah looked out at the workship surrounding the eternal flame, where humans and Zephyrians continued their desperate race against time. The scope of their task seemed impossible, but she had learned something important over the past months. When two different forms of intelligence worked together, when they combined their unique strengths while compensating for each other's weaknesses, they could achieve things that neither could accomplish alone. The question was whether they could achieve enough, fast enough, to prevent the greatest catastrophe in galactic history. The final phase began on a day when the cosmic background radiation itself seemed to tremble with anticipation. Sarah stood in the primary control chamber of the Harmony, surrounded by displays showing the current state of the Eternal Flame Containment Project. After 14 months of unprecedented collaboration, they had successfully repaired 73% of the ancient quantum lattice. But the remaining sections were the most damaged, the most complex, and the most dangerous. The chamber buzzed with activity as human and Zephyrian teams made their final preparations. Dr. Kowalski worked alongside Chief Scientist Velthar at a hybrid control console that combined quantum probability calculators with crystalline resonance matrices. Their collaboration had become so seamless that they often seemed to share thoughts without the need for translation. Emperor Vexithara stood at the center of the chamber, his crystalline form now displaying patterns that no Zephyrian had ever exhibited before. The months of working with quantum uncertainty had fundamentally changed him, allowing his consciousness to exist in multiple probability states simultaneously. He had become something new, a bridge between ordered telepathic thought and chaotic quantum mechanics. "All teams report ready," announced Commander Torres, the human military officer who had been placed in charge of operational coordination. "The hybrid extraction systems are online and stable. The quantum uncertainty generators are functioning within normal parameters." Sarah took her position at the primary command console, feeling the weight of responsibility that came with directing the most important moment in galactic history. Through the chamber's viewing ports, she could see the eternal flame itself, a writhing mass of dimensional energy that seemed to exist in several universes simultaneously. Around it, the partially repaired containment lattice glowed with patterns of light that combined the mathematical precision of ancient science with the adaptive creativity of human Zephyrian collaboration. "Dr. Kowalski, what's the status of the consciousness interface?" "We're receiving clear signals from the embedded civilization," the physicist replied. "They're aware of what we're attempting, and they're ready to guide us through the final repairs." "But Sarah, you need to understand what this is going to require." Sarah had been dreading this conversation for weeks. The final phase of the repair would require direct interface with the consciousness matrix embedded in the quantum lattice. Someone would need to temporarily merge their awareness with the uploaded minds of the ancient builders, gaining access to their knowledge while risking permanent psychological integration. "The interface protocols are extremely dangerous," Dr. Kowalski continued. "We're talking about merging human consciousness with minds that have existed in quantum superposition for millions of years. The psychological stress could be fatal, and even if the operator survives, they might not retain their individual identity." Emperor Vexithara's form pulsed with colors of determination mixed with concern. "I have volunteered to serve as the primary interface. My people's telepathic abilities make me the logical choice for consciousness merger." "Absolutely not," Sarah replied immediately. "Your Magnificence, with respect, this requires someone who understands human-style quantum thinking. Your telepathic gifts are powerful, but they're based on ordered mental structures. The ancient consciousness exists in pure uncertainty states." "Then who?" Chief Scientist Velthar asked, his crystalline form flickering with anxious orange patterns. "Dr. Kowalski's theories are brilliant, but she lacks the neural modifications necessary for direct quantum interface." Sarah had known from the beginning that this moment would come. The quantum implants behind her ear had been designed not just for dimensional manipulation and telepathic shielding, but for something far more dangerous. They could temporarily rewire her consciousness to exist in multiple probability states, allowing her to think like a quantum entity rather than a classical human. "I'll do it," she said quietly. "My neural modifications were specifically designed for this possibility." Dr. Kowalski's face went pale. "Sarah, the psychological integration risks are enormous. We don't know what prolonged contact with quantum consciousness will do to a human mind." "We don't have a choice," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who had already made peace with the consequences. "Every hour of delay increases the risk of cascade failure. If we don't attempt the final repairs now, we may never get another chance." Emperor Vexithara moved closer to the command console, his massive crystalline form radiating patterns of respect and concern. "Captain Chen, if you proceed with this interface, you will be risking more than your life. You could lose everything that makes you yourself." Sarah smiled, an expression that carried both sadness and determination. "Your Magnificence, 18 months ago I was just another human explorer, investigating interesting quantum phenomena. Today I have the chance to save billions of lives and preserve the knowledge of an entire ancient civilization. Some risks are worth taking." She turned to address the assembled teams. "Begin the consciousness interface protocols. I want all quantum uncertainty generators at maximum safe power. Chief Scientist Velthar, please coordinate the crystalline resonance systems to match the interface frequencies. Dr. Kowalski, monitor my neural patterns and be ready to pull me out if the integration goes too far." The chamber filled with the harmonious sounds of Zephyrian technology merging with the quantum hum of human dimensional manipulation. Sarah felt the neural implants behind her ear activating, sending cascades of exotic particles through her nervous system. Her perception began to shift, expanding beyond the normal limitations of human consciousness. The first contact with the ancient minds was like diving into an ocean of liquid starlight. Sarah felt her individual awareness dissolving into something vast and complex, a collective consciousness that had experienced millions of years of existence in quantum superposition. The ancient builders had not died when they uploaded themselves into the containment lattice. They had transcended individual existence to become something greater. Through their shared awareness, Sarah experienced the original catastrophe that had created the eternal flame. She saw a civilization that had achieved technological wonders beyond imagination, only to discover that their greatest accomplishment would destroy everything they held dear. She felt their desperate sacrifice, their willingness to give up individual existence to prevent universal catastrophe, but she also felt their hope. The ancient builders had known that other species would eventually discover the flame, and they had designed the containment system to serve as both prison and teacher. Every repair, every collaborative breakthrough between humans and Zephyrians had been guided by their embedded wisdom. "Sarah, your neural patterns are approaching critical instability." Dr. Kowalski's voice seemed to come from very far away. "You need to begin the integration sequence now, before you lose contact with your own identity." With effort that felt like swimming against a cosmic tide, Sarah focused on the task at hand. Through the shared consciousness of the ancient builders, she could perceive the damaged sections of the quantum lattice as clearly as if she were examining them with her own eyes. More importantly, she could understand exactly what needed to be done to complete the repairs. "Initiating primary integration sequence," she announced, her voice carrying harmonics that no human throat should have been able to produce. "All teams, prepare for synchronized quantum reconstruction." What followed was the most complex engineering project in galactic history, guided by the collective wisdom of 3 different species separated by millions of years. Human quantum manipulation techniques merged with Zephyrian crystalline resonance, directed by the ancient knowledge of builders who had sacrificed everything to make this moment possible. The damaged sections of the containment lattice began to glow with new patterns of light as quantum uncertainty fields reshaped the fundamental structure of space-time itself. Reality twisted and reformed around the eternal flame, gradually transforming it from a dimensional wound into something unprecedented, a controlled gateway that existed in harmony with the natural laws of physics. "Integration complete," Sarah announced, though her voice now carried overtones of the ancient consciousness she had temporarily merged with. "The eternal flame has been successfully stabilized and transformed into a dimensional gateway. The cascade collapse has been prevented. But the transformation was not limited to the flame itself. The collaboration between humans and Zephyrians had created something new in the galaxy. A partnership between species that had learned to combine their unique strengths while transcending their individual limitations. The ancient builder's final gift was not just the preservation of existing civilizations, but the foundation for something greater. Emperor Vexithara's form blazed with colors that had never been seen before in Zephyrian history, patterns that represented joy, gratitude, and wonder all combined into a single emotional symphony. "Captain Chen, what you have accomplished goes beyond the preservation of our civilizations. You have shown us a future where different forms of intelligence can work together to achieve the impossible." Sarah slowly returned to normal human consciousness, feeling the ancient minds withdraw from her awareness like a gentle tide. She was still herself, still recognizably human, but she carried with her the memory of what it felt like to think on a galactic scale. "The future is what we make of it," she replied, her voice once again purely human, but carrying new depths of understanding. "The ancient builders gave us the tools to prevent catastrophe. What we do with those tools, how we choose to grow and explore and cooperate, that's up to us." Through the viewing ports, the eternal flame had been transformed into something beautiful beyond description. No longer a wound in reality, it had become a doorway to infinite possibilities, a symbol of what could be achieved when different species chose cooperation over conquest, wisdom over pride, and hope over despair. The galaxy would never be the same. But then again, perhaps it was time for that to change.